Hey, what's going on, guys? On this episode of Project XJ Overland, I want to talk a little bit about how the lift kit went, and then I'm going to show you all the cool stuff we recently received that we're going to be installing in just the next couple days. It's pretty exciting. We got a lot going on with the project. But before I delve into all that, I owe you guys an apology. So I want to say I'm sorry. When we did the unboxing of the lift kit, I told you, hey, we were going to do this great video, the front suspension, the rear suspension, and share that with you. And you know, I've done enough install videos for you guys to know that when I install something, it takes me twice as long, sometimes 3 times as long, because I got to film it and there's a lot of stuff I'm doing. I got to stop and make sure the camera's right. I got to talk to everybody. I kind of knew that going into it, doing this lift kit install, but what I didn't really factor in was my boys. You know, my boys were in there helping me, and I was teaching them some stuff. And I sometimes forgot about the camera. And so the video, when I sat down in front of the computer, just didn't turn out quite the way I wanted it, guys. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna show you kind of a summary of the lift kit on how it went. This is not gonna be a detailed description of every little thing we did, but I'm gonna share with you some of the things that went well and some of the challenges and kind of how we overcame those challenges. So I hope you guys will understand that it's just not the video that I was kind of hoping I was gonna be, you know, this really long, detailed video. But at the end of the day, the Jeep looks great, it's lifted, and now we can start working on some other stuff. So let me show you how the lift kit went, and then stick around till the end, and I'm gonna show you all the cool stuff I got sitting in my garage that we're getting ready to install. So my boys were really excited to get started, and they just dived right in, and we got things going pretty quick on the front suspension. Pulling the shocks off of the passenger side was pretty straightforward, but on the driver's side it was kind of tough to get in there, and the nut kept turning, so we actually had to get some vice grips to kind of hold it on before we could get them off. Removing the sway bar and the sway bar disconnects and the track bar all came off pretty easy. We didn't have a whole lot of problems, but we did throw PB Blast on just about everything 2 days prior, and that really helped. This lift kit requires a longer drop-down bracket for the track bar, so we had to remove the old one, and that one gave us a little bit of a fit. So our lift kit included new upper and lower control arms, and thankfully those were actually really easy to pull off. We didn't have a whole lot of problems with them, but you know, when you look at the new ones next to the stock one side by side, you can tell we're getting a much better product. It's going to be a lot more rugged off-road. We did make sure all the measurements were into spec. Once the control arms are off, we were able to lower everything down far enough to take the springs off. And I'll tell you, I really expected the springs to be tiny, but really they're not a whole lot shorter than the new ones. But you can see that the new ones are really tightly wound and they're a lot thicker, so it's gonna sit up a lot taller. So we went ahead and installed some new longer bump stops in the front since we didn't have any bump stops to begin with. But they were not going in very easy, so a little jack and a little 2x4, and those guys popped right in. Installing the new upper and lower control arms was a breeze. We didn't have any problems. Thankfully, with those measurements, everything lined up perfectly. So we got the new front shocks installed, and that was a piece of cake. But tackling the front track bar was a whole nother animal. You know, it came with measurements, and we were trying to make it fit with the measurements that it came with, but then we realized, you know what, we just need to let the suspension settle and then adjust the track bar to the suspension, and then everything lined up and our axles are sitting perfect now. Oh, and just a little trick, the bushings are really tight, and getting that pin in there was tough, so using a wood clamp actually did it just right for us. Bolts that hold the bottom of the sway bar links. I've watched a couple videos and they said, oh, just heat it up and bang that thing out of there. Well, let me tell you, for us, that didn't work at all. So what we ended up doing was cutting the bolt in half and then using a tie rod puller to get it out, and then it just came right out with a couple turns, no problem. So our new sway bar disconnect links are pretty nice. It's a nice little system, and it's going to make disconnecting them right before we head out on the trail pretty easy. But there's supposed to be a 15-degree angle atop with the sway bar, and we haven't quite set that right, so that's something we still have to do. So the front turned out pretty good. It's a lot of lift in the front for sure. Now we didn't start on the rear until the next day, and that gave us a chance to kind of throw some more PB Blaster on everything to kind of hopefully loosen things up, because we knew we were going to have a challenge with some bolts. One set of the bolts that I was really worried about was the upper rear shock bolts. I'd heard horror stories about breaking them, and you know, I thought I was probably going to break one, but you know what? I ended up breaking all 4 of them. Can you believe it? Before we could drop the axle all the way down, we needed to make sure that we took off the brake line. That thing was rusted on there pretty good. Thankfully, I've got some new brake lines on order. And boy, I'll tell you, getting the leaf spring bolts off, that was a lot of work. My breaker bar and our elbows got a lot of work out getting all those bolts loose, but eventually we got them all and everything came off pretty nice. There's a really big difference between the stock ones and the new ones. You can tell how much beefier the new ones are. We're going to get a lot of lift out of this. And after how hard we wrenched all those bolts, we made sure we used a lot of anti-seize. The directions on our lift kit weren't the best, and there were some different sized bushings, and we kind of had to sort it out and figure out which one went with. A little trial and error before we got it right. The new leaf spring shackles required a little motivation to get up there, but nothing a rubber mallet couldn't handle. We had to get creative on the passenger side to get the leaf spring and the axle to line up. A little bit of force and a tie strap just to get things to hold, and finally we got it. The kit did come with brand new longer U-bolts and all new hardware, which was very nice, so we didn't have to use the old stuff. The last bit of the project was to tackle those broken upper rear shock bolts. I went down to Harbor Freight and picked up an air hammer and just knocked them all out. They actually came out pretty well. And then I looked online and found a little tip where you take some wire and you wrap it around the bolt and you kind of slide it in this little triangular area and able to pull them in there. It actually worked really well. I was very happy with how easy it was and it turned out, and we got those shocks installed and back up and running. So there's really just some satisfaction about doing that lift kit install yourself. You know, I know my boys are really proud of the work they did on it, and it's nice to finally be done with it because that was a really big task. But now we can get to some of the fun stuff. Let me show you a little sneak peek of what's coming next, guys. We've got tires, we've got steering linkage, and we've got some lights to install. And we're gonna do those in the next coming days, and we're gonna post those immediately as we get them done. And you're gonna watch this Jeep transform a lot over the next couple weeks. I'm really excited to share that with you. And look, if you're still sticking around with us and you visited the channel for the first time, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you along for the ride. We've got all kinds of videos that we think you'd really enjoy. And until next time, we'll see you out on the trail.